Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our County Council meeting for April 23rd, 2020. And I hope everybody is keeping safe and doing all the things that we're supposed to be doing during this COVID-19 epidemic. I do want to put out a little bit of a shout out to those that are grieving this week with regards to the tragedy that happened down in Nova Scotia. And again, I just think that it's our heartfelt, our caring toward that community is certainly must be hurting, and certainly just want to recognize what's going on in that area. At this time, I will ask the Madam Clerk to proceed with the roll call, please. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. We have all council members in attendance except for Councillor Gamble.
Okay, thank you very much for that. All right, moving on then to, is there any declaration of pecuniary interest with regards to the agenda for today among council members? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. If one does arise, you can certainly raise it at that time and follow the proper procedure and filling out the paperwork or however. Moving on now to item 4 on our agenda. We have a delegation. This is sort of new for us with our virtual meetings, and just shows that we're moving forward with adapting to this new world. At this time, we have a delegation from David White on behalf of Walker's Aggregate Incorporated. And so I guess it's Devery Smith Franks, LLP. And so is Mr. White on the line? Madam Clerk.
Mr. White, you're on mute, so you'll just need to unmute your microphone.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Warden McQueen, members of council. Thank you very much for the opportunity to appear before you in video. I also like to thank Mr. Hatton. Some of us require all the technical assistance we can get, and he's been very, very helpful. I did write a letter to the county that went to committee last week, and in that letter I indicated that the transaction that you're proposing with Durham Stone, we believe that the county is leaving $1 million on the table. We in fact think it's more than $1 million, and that has nothing to do with changing the license to go below the water table. That's with the license as it currently is. Now, the county's proposing to do a real estate transaction in the range of $1.5 million, $1.7 million without tender. And it's interesting to note that just last year, my client Walker bought a snowplow from the county for $42,000, and the county thought it was necessary for that to go to public tender. This has been a fairly long process, and last year my client Sutherland Construction was working quite closely with the county and met with county staff and assisted county staff, provided them with a lot of information about licenses and surrender of licenses and rehabilitation and valuation and how that all works. They also provided the county with a draft extraction lease agreement. And Sutherland was under the impression that they would have an opportunity to participate in whatever public process was adopted for the quarry, whether it would be a tender or a request for proposal. But what happened is that the county all of a sudden went silent, didn't respond to Sutherland's inquiries, both by phone and by email. And then we find out in March that the county has in fact gone around Sutherland, done what we consider to be up till then a secret deal with Durham, and cut Sutherland right out of the process. Sutherland was counting on the county's good faith and had purchased the neighboring farm to the quarry, to put itself in a position that it would be able to make a very competitive bid for the quarry because they owned the neighboring farm. we don't think that the county is acting in the best interest of the public. We don't think the public interest is being served. And we think these two transactions, the Rockwood Terrace transaction and the county quarry, should be separated. The county would be far better off financially if they dealt with the quarry, whether it's a sale or a lease or whatever they want to do, and then go out and acquire the property they need for Rockwood Terrace. The valuations you have not been verified. There's a huge range in valuations, and we actually question the valuations on which you are relying. The Durham Stone lands are, the full 75 acres is assessed only at $324,000. Now, we realize that assessment doesn't reflect a true value, but we think there's reasons to question the valuations that you're relying on. The county doesn't need this extra land that they're acquiring from Durham Stone. It's not in your capital budget. You have no plans for it. You're not in the development business. You're spending public money for lands that you have no idea what you're going to do with. You're speculating in land with the public's money, and especially in the type of times that we're currently going through, I don't think that's a prudent position for the county to take. Walker is prepared to donate to the county sufficient land for the Rockwood Terrace facility on the first concession. Now, we realize that's out of the settlement boundary and there would be some planning work that has to be done, but we don't think that would be a real burden to put that land in a good position. So you would end up getting the Rockwood Terrace land for nothing, and you would still have an asset to dispose of, which is anywhere between $1 and $2 million. We have prices all over the spot. Sutherland is in a very good position to make a very competitive bid for the quarry land. We don't think that the county has treated Sutherland fairly. We don't think that the county is acting in the public interest or in good faith. And we would strongly urge you to refer this back to staff with directions that they should go through a public process to dispose of the quarry lands. I want to thank you all very much for this opportunity to address you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. White, and a very thorough presentation that you have given. I'm going to go to county councilors now, and there may be some questions, Mr. White, that maybe you can answer if there are some. So to county council, are there any questions to our delegation this morning with regards to the item of the county quarry lands exchange? Are there any questions?
Mr. Warden, I have a question.
Is that Councillor Millen?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Millen.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Warden. Mr. White, you said in your presentation that there are reasons to doubt the valuation of either property. Can you elaborate a little more on what those reasons might be?
Well, if we take a look at sort of values generally in Durham, we have a range from 52,000 to, I think it's up in the range of 150,000 an acre. But we don't know where the land is located. We don't know what size of parcel. A 2-acre building lot in a desirable location is worth a lot more per acre than a 35-acre vacant former quarry property. So there's huge variations in valuations. And so that's dealing with the alternative site as to what values are in Durham. And insofar as the former gravel pit property of Durham Stone, we don't think that the county has fully looked at all of the costs involved in surrendering that license, rehabilitating that land, and any other work that is necessary there. So we question the high-end value in Durham of $1,000 an acre when you're dealing with a 35-acre vacant parcel of ex-gravel pit lands. So hopefully that answers your question, Councillor.
Anything else, Councillor Millen?
Thank you. No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from county councillors? Anything on your chat, your hands up, Madam Clerk?
No, Mr. Warden. Oh, I see Councillor Soever.
Yes.
Okay,
The email string that you provided us goes back a couple of years. Is there any correspondence actually before that as well?
Councillor, I would have Mr. David Monroe from Sutherland is on as a guest, and I don't know if Mr. Hatton can plug him in, but I would have to go to Mr. Monroe to find out if there was previous correspondence in connection with the county quarry property. Mr. Hatton, can you plug in Mr. David Monroe?
I could, David, but I do not see David Monroe as an attendee in our chat. I have Aaron, Ken, Patricia, and Jennifer, but I do not have another David in there.
Possibly David is with Jennifer Prentice at Sutherland, and if not,
Okay.
Jennifer Prentice might be able to answer that question for the councillor.
I will allow the answer if you're able to provide it, Mr. White.
I don't have Dave here with me. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, my camera's not working, but can you repeat the question? I kind of cut out there for a little bit, but Dave was supposed to have signed in from home today to talk about the past correspondence we did have with the county.
It's Randy here. I suspect that it's Patricia Monroe. He's probably signed in under. I think that's Dave's spouse's name, Patricia.
Okay.
Sorry, councillor, it doesn't appear that we can provide you with an answer.
Okay.
The only correspondence I'm aware of is the package that we provided to you.
Okay. Yeah, because that goes back to May 28th, and so we've had a couple of staff reports since then, November 8th, 2018, and June 27th, 2019, and we were never made aware of any interest in the quarry in either of those cases.
Are you on there?
Mr. Warden, I have just added another account here that may be David.
Okay. Just hold on there, Councillor Soever, and do you want to see if you can invite him in, Rob?
Yes, I do have the Patricia Monroe account unmuted right now. Is that you there, David?
That's me, yeah.
Perfect.
Welcome, David.
Sorry about that. I had changed the name a couple of times, but I guess it still stayed at my wife's name.
That's okay. Go ahead, David.
So in answer to your question, no, I do not recall any other correspondence previous to the email trail that I sent through between myself and essentially Pat Hoy.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any follow-up there, Councillor Soever?
No, that's everything.
Okay. Any other questions, Madam Clerk? Any more hands up there?
No, sir.
Okay, I want to thank you, Mr. White, for presenting today, and also David. There appears to be no more questions, and certainly for the record, your presentation has been recorded.
Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. Okay, so moving on, then there are no other delegations. Again, thank you, Rob and Madam Clerk and everyone for allowing that to happen. So moving on to item 5, we have 3 sets of minutes, and from the first set of minutes of April 9th, 2020, I have Councillor Patterson and Councillor Boddy seconding that motion. Is there any discussion on those sets of minutes of April 9th? Any questions or clarity? Errors or omissions? Okay, seeing none, I don't hear anything. So any opposed to those minutes? All right, I'll call those carried. And then we have a set of closed committee of the whole minutes of April 9th. And I have those moved by Councillor Hicks, past Deputy Warden, and Councillor O'Leary. Any discussion on those? If there are, Madam Clerk, we have to go in closed session if there is discussion. Any discussion on those minutes? Any opposed? Okay, they are carried. Moving on to the minutes of the Long-Term Care Committee of Management dated April 9th. I have Councillor Robinson and Councillor Desai moving those minutes. Any discussion of those sets of minutes? Seeing none, any opposed? Those minutes are carried. Okay, moving on. So then there are no closed meeting matters, Madam Clerk?
No, sir.
Okay, now moving on to bylaw 508220, a bylaw to authorize the disposition of the county-owned quarry and enter into the land exchange agreement for long-term care redevelopment. And I have Councillor Potter and Councillor Millen as seconding that that bylaw. Is there any discussion with regards to that bylaw from County Council? Okay, I hear none.
I see Councillor Burley's hand.
Okay, Councillor Burley, you have the floor. Well, you have the virtual space. Go ahead.
Councillor Burley, you're on mute. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. A question for County Council. With this new video streaming we're doing and so on, it's not the same as being in a council chambers where we're all looking at each other and have better conversation. The question I have, it's either, I guess, to staff or to you, Mr. Warden. Why is there such a big rush to do this quarry land exchange at this time during a pandemic? I'm under the impression that the life in long-term care is going to be a completely different animal when it comes to once the pandemic's over. I really feel that even the look of our new homes is going to be completely different after this all gets together and it's assessed and so on. I really feel that the date we've always been working with for 2025 is not realistic. The problem is we'll extend that date quite a bit for the rebuilds for new homes. And I just question why we as County Council seem it's necessary to push this particular land transfer deal ahead is what we're doing. It's a question. I just would like an answer.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Burley, for that. And certainly the COVID-19 has put us into a different dynamics for sure, and we're not sure when we're moving on. I'm going to go to Madam CAO before I go to councillors. Madam CAO, do you have anything to add to that question?
My response to Councillor Burley would be that we were advised almost a year ago that the redevelopment project for Rockwood Terrace was able to proceed. However, there were requirements on the county in order to enable that project. And one of those requirements was that we were to secure property within the settlement boundaries of Durham. And the deadline for doing that was December 31st of 2019. The province has not communicated any change to that date. They have been communicating with me, asking whether or not we had been successful in securing property. So I've continued to tell them that we are working diligently to that end.
Okay.
But they've never given me any, never provided any instructions to us that something has changed. So until we get an official word from the Ministry of Long-Term Care that there are changes. We can only work with the information.
Okay, thank you for that, Madam CEO. I think Councillor Desai, did you have a comment or go ahead?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. My question through you is to Councillor Burley. He just mentioned that the province will extend the 2025 deadline. I just question on what basis he's making that statement, because I'd rather see us put the urgency into this issue right now and ensure that we can continue to have a long-term care home in Durham, rather than, you know, dilly-dally right now and then find out that the province is unwilling to provide an extension on the license, especially because this has been a fairly contentious issue. It's something that our council has been divided on quite a bit. So I don't want to see that go for naught, and I'd rather just see it come to the end.
Okay, are there any other comments from county councillors before I go to Councillor Burley? Councillor O'Leary.
Yes. And Councillor Robinson also has a question.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Whatsoever.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I don't have any different feelings than I did 2 weeks ago. I still want to make the point of all three, Walkers, Millers, and Harold Sutherland Construction, are major drivers, economic drivers in Grey County, and I don't think any of us should forget that. I'm just wondering if we did pause to check these valuations, what would that involve? And maybe, I don't know if Michael is there, but would we be accused of negotiating in bad faith if we did check on these valuations? Because, you know, just listen to Councillor Desai, this is not dilly-dallying if we save $1 million. I would have to use another word. If we have a chance to save ourselves $1 million, and obviously we have more time, the government's not going to pressure anyone during the COVID. I think we should check this out. We owe it to all three of these companies. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you, Councillor O'Leary. I'm going to hold your question for a minute, and I'm going to take that as a second question that we'll follow up on. I just want to go back to Councillor Burley's question and trying to answer that first, and then I'll come back to your question. I think Councillor Robinson, it was next. Councillor Robinson, with regards to the question that has been asked by Councillor Burley.
Thank you. Good morning, and through you, Mr. Warden. Moving ahead with the redevelopment of Rockwood Terrace is essential. It is of paramount interest to the residents, the citizens of Grey County Council, Grey County. Grey County Council has been working on this project for well over a year. This is absolutely representative of business continuity. This is a project that we must continue on behalf of our citizens, and I am in absolute support of continuing on with this project. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments going back to Councillor Burley's inquiry into County Council and staff?
Yes, Councillor Soever.
Okay, Councillor Soever, go ahead.
Yes, I agree with all the comments made, and the question I have is, why are we where we are today? And I think we really need to have a serious look at that. We've now been provided with a string of correspondence, which we were never made aware of before, showing keen interest on behalf of Sutherland in the quarry lands. Looking back, I've looked at two staff reports, one going back to November 2018 and one going back to June 27th, where we actually gave direction to staff to look at the leasing option. And that was kind of what they were told on the 18th of in 2018 in November as well. And for some reason that was dragged out till, and we were not told about what was going on with regard to the keen interest. Sutherland was so keen they even provided a draft agreement, which you know, needed a bit of tweaking. It was kind of skewed toward the operator side. It needed some things like minimum royalties and things put in, but you know, there was obviously keen interest in advancing the thing. The thing wasn't advanced. unfortunately, I was away for a few months there when the whole other deal was started. But I recognize the importance of moving forward with this. So I'm going to vote for this bylaw. But I'm going to hold my nose when I do that because, I think we should always be provided with all the information. I think it's very salient when you're talking about leasing or selling something for us to know that there is keen interest in it. And, so I think we've got to go back and look at why we are in this position, possibly making a bad decision because we don't have all the information on, whether the estimates of value are correct or not. And we're now being rushed into this when, this thing's been in process since November 2018. I mean, certainly we could have had lease options and assessed the market by now.
Okay, Councillor Swever, I think there was a question in there, and I may come back to you later on. I'm still trying to deal with Councillor Burley's comment. So I see Councillor Potter. Is that right, Madam Clerk?
Yes, and I also see the CAO is interested in providing some comments to you, Mr. Warden.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Potter, then I'll come back to Madam. Do you want to go first, Madam CEO?
Well, if I may, Mr. Warden, just to clarify a couple of points. Staff did advise council that that there had been conversations and assistance provided by Sutherland. That was discussed with council, not at length, but it certainly is not information that was held back. And I believe that perhaps Councillor Swever was not at that meeting. With regard to the leasing and the amount of time that it took, I think we were very upfront with council at the time that as staff, we had no experience in structuring a lease. And we were trying to be very careful and very cautious, which is why we sought out independent expert advice about how to put something together that would be in the best interest of the county. We did take seriously the direction that council had given us to pursue a lease, and we were working carefully towards that end. I'm sorry that it took several months to try and pull that together, and then circumstances changed. We did get 2 independent valuations on the value of the quarry property, and those were provided to council.
Thank you, Madam CEO. So I just want to remind everybody, this is going back to the question that was raised by Councillor Burley. I have other questions in the queue, and so going to you, Councillor Potter.
Yes, just quickly, I'm on the same page as Councillor O'Leary. I wish we'd done this months ago. I wasn't with you then, but I think council should have been offered the options and at least known what Sutherland's and others were willing to offer. And, Councillor O'Leary said, let's see what they'll put on a check. And I think that's what I'd like to see before making a decision. Nonetheless, I agree with Councillor Robinson that this is an important project and that we have to move it forward. I don't want to see it get delayed. I hope we don't get into a legal battle over this in the next few months that ends up delaying it anyway.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any other questions back to Councillor Burley? Because I'm going to go back to Councillor Burley as a follow-up. Are there any other questions to Councillor Burley's? Councillor O'Leary? I will go back to your question, Councillor, but go ahead.
Okay, that's fine. That's what I wanted to ask.
Yeah, I'm coming back to you just as soon as I deal with follow-up from Councillor Burley's question. Any further questions to Councillor Burley's comments? Councillor Burley, do you have a follow-up comment?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I want to make it very clear to County Council. I'm 100% in the rebuild for Rockwood and Durham. I'll never I still stick to my guns. The only thing I wanted to point out to county council, we're living in a different world here altogether right now. Things will change. Things will never be the same as what they were before. And I just caution that we need to really slow down and think about what we're doing. I'm really concerned with the way long-term care bills and everything are put together in the future are going to be completely different what they are right now. We don't want to keep our train of thought going back in, say, January of 2020. Things are different. And I just caution that I think we should pause and think about what we're doing and maybe have a better look at this land transfer deal. I don't know. It's probably the best thing to do. I don't know that. But all I want to make very clear, I'm still 100% behind the build at Rockwood. But we got to make sure it's done right because it's going to be a completely different world. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Councillor Burley. So now I'm going back to Councillor O'Leary, and you had raised sort of a different question. And so do you want to clarify that, Councillor O'Leary?
Well, I'd just like to know, I'm not sure if Michael's in on the meeting, but I'd like to know from him if we would be in legal trouble if we did pause and have a look at this. I mean, I just think every councillor right now should have the opportunity to decide whether we want to go back and look at the valuations or not. But I'd like to hear what Michael says first.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor O'Leary. Michael, are you on? Are you able to?
Point of order, Mr. Warden. Would that not be a closed session matter?
Yes, it would be.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. So is that, I don't want to hold back any opportunity to get information if councillors need it, because I always feel it's important to have all the information. So is there a desire to go on camera? Now, maybe before we do that, are there any other comments around the table that want to raise? And if there aren't, then we can go in camera then if somebody wishes to move and second that motion to go in camera.
I'll move that we go into camera, Mr. Warden.
Okay, moved by Councillor Desai. Is there a seconder? Councillor O'Leary, that we go in camera. And Madam Clerk, can you just clarify the purpose of going in camera?
So the purpose would be solicitor-client privilege and acquisition of property. Now, I see that Councillor Keaveney has a question. Councillor Keaveney, is that for closed session or open session?
Councillor Keaveney? Shirley, are you there?
You're on.
Curious about Mr. White's comment during his delegation where he suggested the possibility of a land donation. So just curious if staff knew anything about that parcel of land.
Okay, for process, we have a motion on the floor to go in camera. That portion, I don't think, for the clarity, would need to be talked about in camera because that's just been made information. So I think we would leave that to coming out in camera.
That's correct.
Okay. So, all right. Were there any other questions before we went in camera, Madam Clerk?
No, I don't see any.
Okay. So the motion has been moved by Councillor Desai, second by Councillor O'Leary, that we go in camera. Any opposed to that? Okay, then that's carried. So I guess to you, Rob, what do we process? What do we need? A minute to go offline and then in camera, or what's the procedure here?
That's right, Mr. Warden. I'm just going to pause the recording here, and I'm going to have to remove our attendees.
If it is. So we are, Rob, are we back live again?
I have started that. It's just going to take 2 seconds to catch up here.
Okay, just let me know. And welcome back, Councillor Hicks. I see you got your orange juice.
All right, we're good to go.
Okay, we're back in open session, and the items for the reason why we went in camera were only discussed, and only those items were discussed from the purpose of going in camera. So now we're back to the resolution or to the bylaw that was moved by Councillor Potter and Councillor Millen with regards to bylaw 508220. There was a request to go in camera to discuss some legal matters, and we did that. We've come out of in camera now, and we're in open session. Are there any other questions with regards to the bylaw?
So, Mr. Warden, Councillor Keaveney had a question prior to going into closed session. I don't know if she would like that
Yes.
answered now.
Thank you for that, Madam Clerk. Councillor Keaveney?
Thank you, Mr. Warden and County Clerk. Yeah, I was just curious if there was any knowledge on staff's behalf in relation to Mr. White's comment about donation of property from Sutherland's.
Right. Who would I go? Maybe Madam CEO and then our solicitor. Madam CEO, do you have a comment there, or?
I think, first of all, if you scroll through the information that Mr. White provided, you would have seen at the very end of that chain of emails, there was a map provided, and that, so that shows you where the property was in case you hadn't got right to there. You would see that was the property in question. There is quite an extensive planning process that would need to be undertaken, and I will let Randy Schertzer speak to that.
Okay, are we able to pull that map up for council just to make sure they saw that, just for information? I know I saw it, and it seemed to be east of the subject property. And I'll go to Randy, and I'm not sure if you're able to pull up just so everybody knows where that location was. Randy, are you there?
I am here. Are you able to pull that up, Heather, or do you want me to do it, to try to do it on my end?
You have to share your screen.
Yeah, whoever has it open can share their screen.
Okay.
I don't have it open right up in front of me at the moment, but I can see if I can find it.
I think it's important just so everybody knows where that was, just for information. So if you didn't quite, I know you had to scroll down quite a piece, Madam CEO, but it was at the very bottom.
Sorry, I didn't have it up open. So. Okay. There it is. Thanks.
Yeah. Go ahead, Randy.
Okay. So, staff have done obviously an extensive review of the property that's shown there in terms of lands for discussion. And prior to this morning, we weren't sure in terms of what was being potentially offered, and as Councillor heard, the offer would be to donate that portion of lands. As Kim indicated, it would be because the lands are outside of the settlement area of Durham. It requires a pretty extensive process in order to bring those lands into a settlement area designation. Things like a comprehensive review that you may be familiar with in going through that in your own communities would be required in order to justify that those lands are required to be added to this area. And part of that is obviously look at, do we have enough land already in the settlement area of Durham to be able to develop, to move forward with development? And if not, then maybe you could look at adding in additional lands to the settlement area. It would trigger a county official plan amendment, a West Grey official plan amendment, and a zoning amendment. The lands are currently designated as rural in the county plan, and they are zoned as A3 or restricted rural in the West Grey zoning bylaw. So again, they would require official plan amendments and zoning amendments to bring them in, as opposed to lands that the county would be potentially acquiring from DSPI. Those lands are already designated. They're already in the primary settlement area of Durham in the county official plan. They are designated as residential in the West Grey official plan and zoned as residential. As noted in my previous staff report, obviously there's studies that would still be required in order to develop the lands that we'd be acquiring from DSPI. But the other lands, as I mentioned, would require the lands being offered by Walkers would be a much greater process that you'd have to go through in order to bring those lands in to get the proper designation and zoning in order to proceed with the development.
So just before you finish, Randy, time frame on that roughly, just roughly, I'm not trying to nail you down, but just process in your general normal, in a normal sense.
Yeah, so with comprehensive review, that triggers a county official plan amendment, West Gray official plan amendment, and zoning. You're probably looking at minimum 6 months, probably to closer to 12 months in total. So probably 6 months to 12 months just to go through that process. And again, there would be no guarantees that we could justify the need to add the lands, right? So because at this point in time, we're identifying that there's at least sufficient lands in order to develop, we're hoping to develop, with being the long-term care facility in Durham.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there questions on that particular, I'll go back to Councillor Keaveney. Do you have any follow-up on that? And then I'll go to other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. No, I'm comfortable.
Are there any other questions to that point that was raised that Randy presented from that sketch there, or conversation? Any comments there? I see none, Madam Clerk. Is that correct?
That's correct. I see nothing here either.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for that. And thank you, Randy, for that explanation on that. And thanks for bringing that forward. Are there any other questions with regards to this bylaw that is on the virtual floor? Okay. I guess I can go through the same process as, are there any opposed as we go through that, and then we'll go from there. And if there's any other part of voting, then we'll follow through on that. So the motion is on the floor, moved by Councillor Potter, second by Councillor Millen. Any opposed to this motion? Is there any opposed? Madam Clerk, is there any opposed there?
No hands raised, no, nothing in the comments, sir.
Okay, so that motion for that bylaw is carried. Okay, then moving forward, I have one more motion for this agenda, and that was moved by Councillor O'Leary and Councillor Robinson to adjourn our council portion of today's meeting on April 23rd. Any opposed to that motion? Okay, that motion is carried. So we have adjourned our regular council meeting at, I'm going to say at 10:45, Madam Clerk, or thereabouts.